and good morning and welcome to Virtual Coffee. I'm Cheryl, Leong, the Chief Freedom Officer from the Growth Hub. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've got your beverage of choice. Oh, here we go. It's Virtual Coffee and we have a special guest today, Kearin Lowry from Workforce Positive. How are you doing today, my dear?
Very well, thanks, Cheryl. How are you? Thank you for
Awesome.
having me.
No, it's great to have you here, Kearin. I'm just going to give a little bit of a brief for those of you who don't know. Kearin has about nearly 20 years of HR experience, and her focus is about all the important aspects of human resources, and particularly as we're building teams as part of Growth Hub Global, even though we're talking about, we might be talking about remote teams, we might be talking about local teams, it's really important that we think about communication, leadership, and culture. And this is the reason why we're talking about achieving success and channeling human energy in our virtual coffee session today, which I think is so cool because I love the word human energy. So welcome and thank you for joining us, Kearin.
Thanks, Cheryl. Such a pleasure. And thank you for the kind introduction as well.
No, absolutely. So tell us what is this notion of channeling human energy? I think because when we think HR, and admittedly,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about others, but HR, I just sort of think it's just recruitment, it's sort of performance reviews, and I'm sure that's all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this idea of human energy. What is it?
Yes, well, we go through a level of process to meet people for our businesses, to recruit, to look at resumes and experience and qualifications, etc., etc. But ultimately, when someone comes to work, and whether that is coming to their home office or an office, a centralized space, all they really can bring with them is their energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no matter what your skill or experience is, if you don't want to use it at work, then we don't get the value of that shared within the business. So channeling human energy is about creating a place where people want to share their energy and they want to be part of something. And until we can ask people to do that freely and willingly, we're not getting the best of everyone in our team.
And so how do you find people with the right, I mean, first of all, I guess stepping back, like what are the steps there for businesses if they're going out to recruit people? What are the things they need to think about to start off with to ensure that you've got the right people with the right energy?
They talk about the bus, the right people on the bus. I think the most important thing to do first is determine what success means in your business. So we call that strategy, right? So I think we're pretty good at saying this is why my business exists and the purpose of why we operate and what we'd like to achieve. And I think we do that quite well. But then we have to channel that down to every single position in the business. So what does it mean to be successful in every role? And there should be a clear line between a role and the overall strategy of the business. And when we can do that, then we can recruit. And we'll find that we get away from the notion of having a shopping list sort of approach to recruitment. So a position description that lists so many different pieces of experience and attributes that you're looking for a unicorn. No one's a unicorn. And ultimately, at the end of a recruitment process, there's generally some sort of discussion and trade-off about, okay, this person's got this and brings this to the table and doesn't have that, but we think that they could really use that well and it could be a great transferable skill. So we definitely don't get the shopping list. What we get is an idea that what someone has done will determine what they'll do in the future and how they will use those skills. And that's the energy part.
Right. And are there specific sort of, I don't know if it's a checklist or a question or the specific things that you're looking out for, apart from what's in the, position description to go, I want this, this, and this. Okay. So people can tick that off. Like, is there, how do we work through what's a feeling type thing as opposed to something that's a little bit more objective?
Yes. Okay. So definitely when you talk about energy, you can talk about what people achieve and how they talk about their previous positions. So, how do they talk about their team and colleagues? How do they talk about the business? What level of attachment did they have to what they did? So someone who feels really connected and has a sense of pride and achievement will talk about it differently to someone who doesn't. So that's one indication. Talking to people that they've worked with, I highly recommend doing 360 reference checks. So we tend to focus on asking people, you know, can you give us the contact details of someone that you've worked for? So someone who supervised them. But what about people that have worked side by side with them, or people that they have supervised? So, you know, thinking more broadly about the circle of influence that person is going to have, and their relationships that they would have built previously, and doing some more investigation around that.
And how, I mean, we talk about references, right? And everyone, when they're giving references, they're obviously going to find someone that is hopefully
Likes
going to
them.
give them, yeah, exactly. They're not going to go, I had a really bad relationship with this person. I'm going to, so how do you work through that with references?
Yeah, well, look really closely at the resume first. So they have to be relevant to the roles that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And, you know, recently worked for is also good.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, if someone can give you a reference from 10 years ago and that person still has a very high opinion of them and has worked with a lot of people since, so that says something about them as well. So you just need to be really clear about who you're talking to. So it's okay to say, I worked with this person 10 years ago and now I call them a personal friend. That's actually not a bad thing. It's just being sure that you know that you're talking to a friend who used to work with them, as
Yeah.
opposed to, you know, my most recent employer.
Yeah. And
You
are
probably
there
ask a few
certain,
different questions.
yeah, and I guess I'm coming to the question bit, like, you know, with references, are there specific sort of questions that you can ask that probably a little bit more challenging, that might actually dive into addressing any particular sort of red flags, if you know what I mean there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we definitely ask about, you know, conflict with others, and some conflict is good. So none of these questions rule out a person, but it just helps you explore their work experiences. So conflict with others is important to understand. So if you're having conflict with other people, is it healthy conflict or not? Did it get to an outcome? You know, because we can represent our different views and create conflict by doing so, but we can still have very healthy relationships within conflict.
Yeah.
We ask questions like, what is their development plan? You know, if they haven't identified learning and development opportunities for themselves, or their manager hasn't, then, you know, we want to talk about that, because everybody should be thinking, what else would I like to achieve? And it doesn't mean a promotion or a different job necessarily, but definitely, how do I grow as a person? Because someone who
Yes.
continually wants to grow, again, that's a factor of energy, right?
Yes.
So and then a question that we ask, you know, you would generally ask an employer or a previous work colleague, would you employ this person again? And we tend to ask, if this was your business and you were employing people for your team, would you employ this person? And we feel that that gives a different sort of answer.
Yeah, okay. And that's an interesting one, because I think, I
Yeah,
mean,
if it
that's a
was your investment.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I like that you talk about having these development goals and growing in the business. Admittedly, that's something that we do at the Growth Hub as well. You know, we like to see businesses and our people grow. One of the jokes that my team has is that they say, Cheryl, sometimes you know, you're so empowering, which is great, but then you know, sort of go, well, people want to, it's great because they want to be able to challenge themselves and try new things,
Yes.
and which is wonderful, because then we actually find them in spots that they really are passionate about. But then it sort of creates a little bit of a gap again in the area that they originally were in. So I
Yes.
mean, I think that's an
Yes, you have
interesting
to
one.
backfill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to backfill that. I mean, in your opinion, if you've seen that before, like, is that a, you know, how, not whether it's a good or a bad thing, but is it, how do you manage
Yeah.
that when you sort of go, actually, you're really good, but you're fantastic in this spot, but
Yeah.
I've got a gap now.
I've only got one of you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
um, Yeah, look, we used to measure success in business around things like turnover, so how much you can retain people, and a low turnover was a good thing.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like I've probably changed my view on that a little bit.
mm-hmm.
So what I would say, and it kind of resolves your issue as well, when you promote people, you create a gap. When people leave, you create a gap.
Yeah.
And I would focus on utilization. So what I mean by that is, the more procedures and processes that you have within your business that help your team do exactly what is required of them, makes their life as easy as possible. You get better utilization whether someone's been there for a month or a year. But also it means when someone moves on from a role through promotion, like you're talking at in this instance, the ability to backfill them is easier. And the person that moves into that space can be more successful faster. So yeah, I would put in place some sort of business, we might traditionally call it a policy, but a bit of a philosophy that we want to be able to promote from within. So when we do that, this is the steps that we take to ensure success in our new role for ourselves, but also for the colleague coming in behind me. How do I make that transition? Do they become their buddy?
Yes.
But if every single team member every year had a goal of ensuring that all of their work procedures were schmick, that means everybody always knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage that as well.
And that for businesses in general should be one of their operational goals, isn't it? To ensure they've got systems and processes, particularly if you want to be able to scale. And so, I mean, let's talk about a little bit more around like culture and getting people, the right people that fit your company culture. And we have a lot of small business owners that might just be a solopreneur, so they're probably not really sure. Do they already have a culture if they're one person or two?
Yeah, generally it's a culture that's dictated by their brand. It's the culture that they share with other people, rather than, if it's not a business in the sense that there's multiple staff, it's the culture is how they operate, and that's the feelings and the intangibles that they create with their clients. But even in a small team, so my team is very small too. There's 3 of us who work virtually full time, and we are growing. But I would say, how do we create culture is by looking beyond the work skills and qualifications again. So thinking about what the values are of the business and how to communicate those. So what I've noticed, particularly working with small businesses, is that there's a capacity issue in the business. So there's more work to be done than there are people to do it. So we look to recruit. And when that person comes in, there's not necessarily a lot of infrastructure to support them. And there's not a lot of time taken to set expectations around in this business. When you come into this business, you have these skills and experience, but this is how we want you to use them. This is the way that we go about things, as opposed to doing it how you've been taught previously, what have you. But because that conversation doesn't always happen, there's a gap, and people feel like, oh, okay, I need to get in and be productive. And so they start going about work the best way they can, and they can go off track very quickly. If you think about railway tracks, if you're not on them, you can get, you can
derailed,
very quickly derailed, yes. And you don't want to create train wrecks, right? So taking the time early on in employment to talk about things other than just the job, so the business, the culture, the teamwork aspects that you're looking for is important, and then measuring that. So when we write an employment contract, it's not unusual for us to, if a business has a set of values, to actually put that as a cover page and say, we're offering you these terms and conditions, but we want you to be in agreement with these values first and foremost before you look at the employment offer. Because ultimately it's the values that determine whether or not you're going to, one, like working here and stay working here.
Yeah, that's a really good point about saying, this is who we are, and that sort of welcome letter that really sets the tone of who they're starting to work with. The other point you raised as well is working remotely, right? And obviously all of last year there was a huge change. Everyone moving from offices to remote. What were some of the things, and were there things that came up that you sort of go, oh my goodness, we never really thought about this? What was maybe the top 3 things that really changed the whole face of HR for you and what you've seen?
Okay. Look, wow, it was such an interesting time. It's hard to go back there emotionally, to be honest, because it was so strange. I remember doing a webinar style, maybe a podcast with Slipstream Coaching, and they talked to me about, well, what do we do for all the parents out there who, they're having now to deal with homeschooling, homework,
everything. My goodness. I don't want to go back there.
Tough. Like, it was a tough time. And one of the recommendations I made was, well, let's just give all of these professional people some credit and ask them to think about how they can best structure their home life their work life, their kids, right? And so
Mm.
if that means working really early in the morning because that's the best time for them, then let them
Mm.
do that. And
Mm.
just see how it goes, and then try and improve any of the issues that arise as they arise. And I still stand by that. Like, the amount of things that working parents achieve before 9 o'clock
Mm.
is extraordinary every single day. So
Mm.
they have an ability to really be self-managing and get an extraordinary amount of things done. So if there is a challenge for them, helping them empower them to structure it themselves is really important. And I say that to my team too, like, you are the captain of your ship.
Mm.
I had a staff member once start a conversation with me, and they were sort of moving towards asking me permission for something that was fundamental to their life, right? So I think they had to pick a child up from school unexpectedly. And I kind of picked up on this, and I was like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, you don't ask me permission.
Yes.
I'm not the captain of your ship. You're the captain of your ship. If you need to tell me that there's a work issue and I have to pick up my kid and, share that work issue with me to try and resolve it, that's fine. But, we don't ask permission from adults to do things that are fundamental to their well-being, their family's well-being.
Yeah.
So I think really encouraging that, I use the word infantilize. We do tend to create structures, and particularly control-based structures in business, that infantilize adults, right?
Mm.
You have to be here at a certain time. You can only have 10-minute breaks. You can, and all of those things are fair and reasonable in the workplace. That's fine. But it's about saying that they're responsible for achieving that, not me making, watching over you. And when we start
Absolutely.
doing that, we take people's sort of modus of control away, and it's that accountability and empowerment that people need in the workplace. So you create a lot of other negative things when you don't let adults be adults.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you found that the fact that people have a bit more of this, I wouldn't say leeway, but this empowerment to sort of work from home,
Yeah.
like, what have you seen in people in terms of productivity and their dedication to their work as well?
I think there's a really high level of sense of achievement. So people really feel like, hey, we overcame something extraordinarily hard, and we kept Australia going. We kept, our businesses profitable. We did an incredible amount of work in a way that we didn't expect to. And so there's a sense of achievement that we overcame that huge obstacle. And I feel like we deserve to feel that sense of achievement. So that's really positive. I also see that there's a value placed on work-life balance now that's probably greater than it was before. So any business that previously didn't have working from home policies, asked their staff to work from home, and now have asked them to come back to the office full time, they're probably struggling a little bit because their team members are saying, hey, but we were able to do that, so we want that flexibility to remain. So it's about finding a new center for what is an expectation around flexibility and working from home. And those conversations are happening now, I would think, as part of, in the next 12 months, I would think that there would be a pretty big shift from, a more traditional kind of business operation model. And also we see less businesses taking up big chunks of commercial office space. And so they're sort of saying, a percentage of working from home is needed for everyone. So there's been a lot of new norms for different businesses. They're kind of finding their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of people drafting their employment agreements, because that's one of the things that you helped us with, are you finding that you're needing to now put in place, which weren't there before, these sort of work from home, flexible working arrangements into these employment agreements? And if so, what are some of the key ones that you've noticed that are coming into place now?
Yes. Okay. There's a couple of things around that. Unless an employment agreement is to work from home, I wouldn't recommend it being in the employment agreement. So having a workplace policy outside of an employment agreement provides more flexibility for things to move and change. Whereas if it's in an employment agreement, it can only be altered by the two parties coming to an agreement.
Okay.
Whereas workplace policy is about consulting with the work group and the people in it, obviously, getting views about what would work in that business, and then putting something in place that provides business. And that can then be utilised, whether it be, now or in 12 months from now. That policy might have to shift again, and so you can shift it. And you would do a lot of communication and a lot of different kind of case studies or case examples. So if you want to utilise this policy, here's an example of how you might go it. So give some scenarios to people so that they can utilise it effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's awesome. Awesome.
Like
I think that really covers off a lot of things in terms of just the things to keep in mind, particularly a lot of people working remotely now. We're obviously working globally. We're a lot more integrated globally as well.
we're still here.
We're still here? There we go. Sorry, we lost each other for
yes, no,
a
that's
moment.
okay.
Oh, good.
We're back.
Kearin, tell us a little bit about what Workforce Positive does for business owners, so we can, people who are looking for some help, particularly in this space. Again, when we started doing payroll and employment agreements, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. And you've really helped us sort of navigate that space. So tell us a little bit more about the business itself.
Yeah, so Workforce Positive is a HR consultancy service. So we would recommend that all small businesses look at their foundational processes first. So like you say, the first thing is I'm employing someone, what are my legal obligations? So making sure that you're across the industrial relations requirements for employment, so a modern award, and then there's several pieces of communication that need to go to every person that you employ, and that is advised by the Fair Work Ombudsman. So we make sure all of that happens. But before you employ anybody, I always recommend that you look at your insurance. So as a business owner, making sure that you have good governance and protection in place, because ultimately it's true that, an employee is one of the most likely people to litigate against you, make some sort of claim. So having some protection in place, or at least knowing what protection you need, then you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want it, is really important before you go down the path of actually employing people.
And in terms of insurance, are you talking about it, like, this insurance like professional indemnity and public liability? That's the sort of insurance that we're talking about.
No. So yes, you need those insurances to operate your business. Generally, PI and public liability, etc., is required. But also to protect you against claims from staff, it's usually something more like a management policy or a director's insurance. So having a talk with a reputable broker to let them know, look, I'm thinking about employing people. What sort of protection do I need to put in place? Is really important.
Yeah, that's really good to know, because a lot of businesses will have PI insurance and public liability, and that's probably something that we've got to look into. Is there something that because we're often thinking outside, like we're going to have, if in the worst case scenario, disputes with clients or whatever, you're not thinking internally. So there are insurances for internal as well. Okay, that's good to know.
And we do, and we work with a reputable broker that we'd be happy to connect people with if they have questions.
That will be good. So I'll be emailing you.
Excellent.
After this
well,
as
there
well.
we go.
There we go.
Welcome.
Excellent. No, that's fabulous. Yeah. No, keep going. I think there's more that you guys do, obviously.
Yeah, so once we understand what our obligations are, it's about putting all of the necessary documentation in place and communication with staff members. So establishing a process for when you recruit to make sure you tick all of those boxes. And then, there are requirements around your payroll, so making sure you know what they are, making sure you know how your pay slip needs to be presented, so what needs to be on it and when it needs to go to staff. And then the next step is, how do we actually make people feel welcome and clear about why they've joined the business? So welcome in the sense that, this is who we are, and, this is how we operate. These are the people to go to if you have questions and problems, and helping people settle in, making an environment where they can feel connected. But then, why am I here? So one of the things that business owners get frustrated with is things like, why aren't people just doing things how I think they should be done? So getting that out of your head and creating a processes, creating the necessary infrastructure for someone to step in and have reference material. have a video to watch so that they know what you're talking about, and they can watch it again if they have another question or they can't remember it all. Having a procedure so they can go through it step by step again without having to go to another person, because people do enjoy being independent.
Yes.
You know, to be able to see that they're having some success, not bothering, I'll put that in inverted commas, another staff member. So when we can give people some tools, then you empower them to actually go about it in the right way, and then they can get that sense of achievement. Yeah. So they're probably the two things. If you're going to onboard someone, do it properly. And if you're going to employ someone, do it legally.
Yeah, that's a good, yes, always a good idea. And then if you've got to have insurance around that as well, look into it.
Absolutely. Get protection so that you can just sleep at night. And in the worst case scenario, you're always covered. That's the idea.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, if anyone needs to get in contact with you to talk about any of their HR needs, where's the best place to be able to reach you?
Yeah, so you can come to our website, so workforcepositive.com. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn. We are pretty active on LinkedIn. Myself and the team, so Jess Errington, HR Services Advisor, and Nicole Dunbar. So she provides our HR team administration through her business. So, you know, the three of us are very active on LinkedIn, and, you know, welcome all of your questions. But yeah, generally the website or our email as well. So Kearin at workforcepositive.com.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on Virtual Coffee, Kearin, and have an absolutely lovely, lovely day. That was and I hope my team's watching this as well, because there's so many great things that we've got from there that we can apply for ourselves. Again, there are things that, you know, particularly if you're looking to employ someone in Australia to, you know, as part of your team, do it the proper way, because I had no idea. And these guys really looked after us for that. So thank you, Kearin. Lovely.
Thanks,
have an
Cheryl.
absolutely lovely day, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. It's a pleasure working with you. Thanks, Cheryl.
Everyone, we'll see you on the next session of Virtual Coffee next time. Ciao, ciao.
See you
Bye-bye.
Bye.